Good morning, Birds fans. It's a summer Tuesday here on Birds 365. Thanks for streaming in with Mac here on Birds 365. John McMullen and Jody McDonald. No Eagle activities today. No Eagle roster moves. No Eagle trades. There's no new Eagle news. So this season is the season of ratings and rankings and lists and where do you
disrespect? Don't forget disrespect.
Oh, I'll get the disrespect. Fear not. We've got that again, which is borderline shocking to me. But again, we'll get to that. Two good writers, two good Eagle Beat guys that I want to touch on stuff that they've done in the last 24, 48 hours. One of which, whose name is John McMullen, for Sports Illustrated with his tag team partner Ed Kratz, has started his Eagle top 25 player rundown. We had fun with this last year. I got to tip my hat to John McMullen. He said, sorry, I'm just not putting the Kobe Dean on the top 25. And I thought he was going to fight his way onto that. And he just never got off the bench other than special teams. So John was right to not have the Kobe Dean on the top 25. Correct me. I want to portray this accurately. You and Ed come up with your own independent top 25 lists, and then you give out points as per where they fall on the top 25, correct?
Correct. So we mesh it together. So we have two people, independent trying to come up with the best list possible, which is interesting you bring this up because I think it was 8 through, I'm not going to give it away, obviously, but 8 through 14, which is weird. We got the exact same order. 8 through 14.
That is a little weird, right? Yeah. Right, basically in the middle of it.
Yeah.
You happen to match up for about 8 or so spots in a row. That is a little strange, but you got to get there. We're starting at 25 and working our way down. And the first one on the combined SI list for top 25 is Kenny Gainwell, who you had on your top 25, but Ed Kratz did not. Correct?
Correct. I had him, I think, 23rd. Ed didn't have him at all. He kind of beat out Cam Jurgens for number 25. We both had Cam on the list. I had Cam at number 25. Ed had him a little bit higher, I think 24. So Kenny won out because I had him higher. So right there. But yeah, I mean, hey, Cam, I think is going to be on that list after the season. We do it before the season. We do it after the season. I think Cam eventually is going to be on that list. But, I mean, he's all projection, Cam Jurgens. I think Kenny Gainwell played pretty well in the playoffs. When Miles Sanders got a little bit banged up, I thought he had a disappointing season, to be honest. For the majority of the regular season, I thought – and it – I thought the Eagles were disappointed, to be honest, as well. But I think he reignited some of that optimism by the stretch run that he had. And now he's going to have an opportunity. And I do think he's going to have an opportunity. I think a lot of people are defaulting to, well, it's going to be Swift and Penny. I don't know about that. I think Kenny's going to be given an opportunity, and hey, if he falters in the summer, he falters. And if those guys play well, those guys play well. But I do think it's going to be a real competition. And again, contracts, I say it all the time. Contracts don't tell you everything, but they tell you a lot. And the Eagles didn't go all in on Rashad Penny. And I didn't get a buzz with Rashad Penny in the spring. Zach Berman was on the show yesterday, Jody, and he gave wise advice. Don't get caught up into what happens in the spring. So maybe I'm getting a little too caught up, but I was surprised at how little buzz there was over Rashad Penny in the spring. And it's a position you don't even look at until the pads come on, right? But there was buzz for DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell. And even Trey Sermon, the head coach, kept bringing up.
The coach is a Trey Sermon fan. We know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's something to it. I do. And all those 1-year guys that they signed to whether you want to call it the Walmart clearance aisle. Look, if they perform in the summer, they're going to be a part of things. If they don't, you can easily move on from those guys. Simple as that.
Yeah, you're a bigger Kenny Gainwell fan than I am. And the way that you stated it, played well during the playoffs. He had one mega game during the playoffs, had a huge game against Giants, 112 yards. He's easily his best career game ever. He had 48 against the 49ers on 14 carries. That's 3.4 yards per carry. That's nothing special. And in the Super Bowl, with Miles being a non-factor after the bad decision / first play and hurting himself, 7 carries for 21 yards. Biggest game of the year. He did next to nothing in the Super Bowl. So I think the whole did well during the playoffs is slightly over. He had an unbelievable game. 112 yards on 12 carries. That's 10 yards a carry. That's off the charts. It's one game. And that's why I think they went out and got Swift and the oft injured back. And that's why I think people are not getting as nuts for him, because it's just a foregone conclusion that he's going to get hurt. We'll see if Kenny Gainwell gets the chance. And I'm almost surprised that you're the Kenny Gainwell fan, because one thing that you and I agree on is everyone says, they get him the ball out of the backfield. They'll throw the ball to Kenny. That's where Kenny Gainwell's going to make his plays. He's going to make his plays in space. We just don't believe that that's going to be the default mechanism of this quarterback when he's got the ability to take off and make plays with his feet. I just do not believe it. Wasn't a big part of the Eagles' game plan last year, throwing it out of the backfield. I don't think it's going to be any bigger this year. So I'm not exactly sure where Kenny Gainwell is going to grab the spotlight.
Yeah, a couple things. And when part of it is, you're right. If you're just going to look at raw numbers, certainly the Eagles didn't run the football effectively in the Super Bowl. I mean, nobody's going to argue that. He had more juice. If you just watch the games, he had more juice than Miles. Now, part of that was, as I said, Miles was banged up. And he went through the season. He went through the ringer. He had the 1,269 yards. He had all the touches through a 20-game season. So it kind of makes sense that it was worn down. So that's part of it. And Kenny just looked like he had more left in the tank, and he should, because he barely touched it. I think 27% in the regular season, which is very similar to where he was as a rookie. And remember, this is number 25. All right. There's 22 starters, Jody. I'm saying is he's the 25th best player on this team. That's not top 5. That's not all pro
I get
level.
it.
That's one of their top backups. And that's what he's going to be. He's going to be one of their top backups. I've never thought Kenny Gainwell is going to be a lead back in this league, because I think he's got size issues. But I think he's already shown he's a good change of pace guy. And Nick Sirianni likes the running back by committee, unless Dalvin Cook shows up, and they're going to use a running back by committee. And if that's the case, I think he's going to be a part of it. And I do think he's got tremendous receiving ability. And you know how I feel about that. And we're on the same page. It's not as important here as it would be with the Chargers, for instance.
Correct.
Where I think he'd be catching 60, 65 balls. I don't think it's as important here. But I do think he's an underrated runner. In fact, one of the shocking things to me over his first 2 seasons is how much they use him inside the 20. Because whether he can hide, and he's better between the tackles than people give him credit for. Now, I don't think he can run it 20 times, 25 times. But again, we're talking 25th. So we're talking top level backup. And I think he's one of their best backups. I really do.
Yeah, because of the 1 subtraction and 2 additions that they made, if Rashad Penny stays healthy, I think Gainwell's going to get the 3rd most carries. Even if you want to go to touches, you want to add in the passes out of the backfield, as little as they may be per game. I think he's going to get the ball the 3rd most on his field. I'll have him still, despite the verbal love that the coach gives Trey Sermon, I'd still have him, Kenny Gainwell, ranked ahead of Trey Sermon, but the coach may just shock us all and prove that he meant what he said. I think he's just trying to lift the guy's spirits up. You're a bigger Kenny Gainwell fan than I am, but that's okay. No, here's what I wanted to get to. Our friends over at Pro Football Focus are doing lists galore. This started last week into this week, and in both individual positions, overall offense, overall defense, overall rankings for teams, individual positional rankings. Man, they got some Eagle love going on in Pro Football Focus. Number one offensive line in football, and it's not close, the Philadelphia Eagles. Number one defensive line in all of football. This one was, at least they write it a little closer, the Philadelphia Eagles. Number one team, roster strength, top to bottom, 1 through 90, I guess now, but it's going to get cut down to 1 through 53. The Philadelphia Eagles with the San Francisco 49ers, number 2. We talk about how the AFC is better than the NFC. I quickly tell you the top 10, 7 of the 10 are AFC teams, which means only 3 are NFC. But the top 2 are the Eagles and the 49ers. As I told you yesterday, I think the drop-off between the 49ers to the Cowboys is bigger than the drop-off between the Eagles and the 49ers. So, and wide receivers, Cincinnati Bengals 1, the receivers, because they included the tight ends. Cincinnati Bengals 1, Philadelphia Eagles number 2. So they got them the second best receiver group. Best offensive line, best defensive line, best overall roster, second best wide receiver. Where do you think Pro Football Focus has the quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles ranked?
4-ish, 5-ish.
Keep going up.
2?
No, up. Up as in away from
I
number
thought you
1.
meant up on that.
Yeah,
wow.
sorry. Yeah,
7?
7. Now,
So
we all got
Chris
a little
Sims.
crazy that Chris Sims
Sims
went with him at number 7. But Pro Football Focus also had Jalen Hurts ranked 7th. The difference being Sims had Trevor Lawrence at 6 and Jalen at 7. Pro Football Focus put Rodgers back into the top 5. Sims had Rodgers falling down a little bit off the season that he had last year. I'm
a Rodgers guy too, so But hey,
would you have Rodgers ahead of Hurts?
Boy, that's a tough question. That's like a Soapy's choice for me. Look, if Rodgers is worse, it's because the age has started to creep in.
Of course,
Rodgers is. That's not an insult. I hope Eagles fans understand. This is not an insult. Aaron Rodgers is, I'm going to have difficulty putting anybody above him when he's playing at a high level. And that's why you as a Jets man should be so excited. Now, maybe he is done. Maybe he is cooked. Maybe he is on the downside. I mean, he is going to be 40, I think, or is 40.
I think he turns 39 in season.
39. So, I mean, it happens to everybody. There's going to be a slight descent, but boy, he's so smart. He's so good. He makes just tremendous decisions. Accuracy, arm strength. I haven't seen a huge drop off, so I would probably put him ahead. Yes.
Right. And so did Pro Football Focus. I have him number 3. I think the only 2 quarterbacks off what he did last year that you can rate above him are Mahomes and Burrow.
Well, off last year, yeah, no question. He had the second best season. So in theory, you could rate him above Burrow. Now I'm trying to mesh the 2 together and trying to do projection and put it together. If you force me, look, it's not wrong. I would put Joe ahead of him, but he was better than Joe last year. I put Aaron. He was clearly better than Aaron last year, but the consistency you have to also factor in. Aaron Rodgers has done it for a long time, so you kind of, if he has 2 seasons like that, you got to add in the supporting cast. That's what makes this stuff difficult. It's what makes this thing fun. And the Eagles do have. The Eagles are the most. I said it last year on the show so many times. It became very clear about midway through the season, Eagles were the deepest, most well-rounded team in football. And that's why you see they're number one here. They're number one there. Bucky Brooks was the one who put their defensive line, which I think was a little much, number one in the entire league for any position group. The wide receivers, the quarterback, the tight end, all over the place. They're top tier. You rarely see this, especially in this era. So that factors into it as well. But he's a top 5 quarterback. I think 7's a little bit low.
Yeah, I was surprised, and people did get their nose out of joint, guilty as charged. That he had Chris Sims had him down at 7, and the Pro Football Focus guys put him at the exact same spot, which I absolutely believe is low. And as far as the surrounding cast, it's chicken and egg time. Was Jalen's advanced game the reason why the Eagles at certain positions look as good as they do, or did those guys all step up and drag Jalen with them? I am not going to just default to, Jalen's got a ton of talent around him. Well, part of that talent stepped up because Jalen stepped up, and all of a sudden they got better. So what kind of an effect does his advanced game have on their games?
Yeah,
I think that's a very fair question.
I don't think it's either or. I think it's both. I think, Miles Sanders is a perfect example of that. And I talk about running backs all the time. I said it up to the draft. I said the Eagles don't need a top tier running back because, Jalen Hurts makes things so much easier for the running backs. That's a perfect example of him elevating people. Now, we know before or after, we know Lane Johnson's great. We know Jason Kelsey's great. We know what the defensive line has been. There are certain guys, we know what Slay has been, what Bradbury's been. The defense as a whole, I mean, it helps them when your offense is scoring points. So that factors into it. We know A.J. Brown can play. We know Devontae Smith can play. But he also, makes them a little bit better. So I don't think it's either or. I think it's a combination.
Right.
But, hey, it's easier to play when you have a lot of talent. And he's got a lot of talent. It's fair to say that as well. It would be disingenuous to say he doesn't. So I think it's both.
As long as we're acknowledging both, it's not Jalen riding on anybody's coattails. I'm not going to say that Jalen lifts all these mediocre players at star status. No, they got star level players. It's a little bit of both. And that's why I'm not going to count that as a negative against Jalen because he's got talent around him. Oh, by the way, other guys have some very talented players around him, too, at the quarterback position in the NFL who are ahead of him on the list. All right, Johnny Mac, chatting you up here on Birds 365, a summer Tuesday. Coming up next, we're going to get one of our regular guests from CBS Sports. And, oh, by the way, guy on CBS Sports put a quarterback list out. He had Jalen Hurts higher than number 7. We'll probably make him get on the record and tell us where he'd rank Jalen Hurts. We've got Jeff Kerr from CBS Sports jumping in next here on Birds 365.